What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Thee CrazyFaceUno Podcast. I'm your host, Shane McNeely. And just a reminder, CrazyFaceUno is inspiring others to do good and make a difference in our local and global community. And I have today a friend, a very wise man. He's actually a former boss of mine and just an all-around great guy, Noah Manning. Noah, welcome.
I'm grateful to be on the podcast with you, and I dig it, man. It's cool to hear you. I got the chills when you did the introduction.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I kind of spoiled the surprise, but it's not really much of a surprise. You were my manager, one of my bosses at Invisible Children.
Yeah, it's a trip to hear you say that, because it kind of brings back the memory of that whole time, which was just a strange experience, But it's also interesting because I don't feel like, I guess I didn't look at myself as your boss in a way. So it's interesting. It's just interesting to think about back on that time. Yeah.
I mean, the truth is you were. But, I mean, I think that we were probably more friends than you were my boss in a lot of ways, I just felt very supported. I felt like you've been, even though a lot of time has passed in between, the moments we talk a lot, I still kind of think of you as like a mentor in some ways, just a sage man that has always been there to provide some wisdom when I need it.
Awesome, man. Well, no, I'm like, that is like an honor to know that you think of me that way. And I know that it's actually been a while since we connected briefly the other day. Yeah. Just for more logistical purposes. But right. Yeah, man, I mean, I know it felt like we went pretty deep while we worked at Invisible Children together.
For sure.
I will always cherish that time and the bond we developed. Yeah. And then, it's been interesting to kind of, flow in and out of each other's lives over the past, 5-7 years that it's been.
Isn't it crazy it's been that long?
Dude, it is. Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's been as long as it has since we were there.
Time flies, man.
It sure does. It sure does. I wrote down a few things just to kind of give people a little background on you, Noah.
Yep.
You went to school and you studied, I wrote down integral counseling psychology. Yeah,
so that was a master's program that I started, prior, like my, back in it's probably 20 years ago almost now. Yeah. In undergrad, I did a business degree.
Right. From the University of San Diego, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. And, so I've kind of had an interesting, path, as I think we all do, in terms of finding my way through what I feel called to do work-wise. And I don't know if at this point in my life, I wonder if there's ever like a destination to that. It almost feels like more of an iterative process, that's ongoing.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think sometimes it's just good to look at it that way instead of like you've reached the point,
Totally. Totally. I'm glad that you can see it that.
Yeah.
It's cool that you can hold it that way for sure.
Maybe it's because I feel the same way as you. Like it's just been this wandering journey. But as I get older, there's been several moments. This is just a tangent in some ways, but there's been several moments throughout my life that I was like, oh, when I get to this age, when I get to this point, then I'll know and I'll have things figured out. And the older I get, the more I realize that we're all just faking it. We don't have a clue what's going on.
Well said, man.
we're just trying to figure it out as we go. So
totally. And I mean, it's cool because like for me, that has become way more clear.
Yeah.
Becoming a dad.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And having a baby and just being like, yeah, dude, it's it's the fucking best, dude. There's nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, in one way, it's the best, but it definitely highlights, like, dude, like, I'm supposed to be an adult and, like, kind of know what is going on.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's like, there's some truth to that, right? Like,
sure.
we have the experiences that I have the experiences that I've had throughout my life. And that gives me a certain, kind of perspective on things or point of views on things. But at the same time, it's just like, dude, like, there's really no way to know what is absolutely right. And so it's just kind of a little bit of feeling my way through the dark. And I think, accepting that that's just the reality of at least the way I find that life. That's what makes the most sense, is like, shit, I don't really ultimately know whether I'm doing the right thing or not, but I'm going to lead with my heart. And hopefully if I make mistakes, which I'm going to, I'm open enough and humble enough to learn from them, and also, make it right with the people, anyone that I've kind of hurt along the way.
Yeah. That humility is huge, of just like, man, I screwed up, and owning it and moving on. I think it just gives, it's just respected, if you take the high road and just own up and own it and move forward. And, I've said it multiple times on here, like, man, I've made so many mistakes throughout my life, and I just try to be the best person I can be, and trying to improve myself every single day. And, and also be gracious along the way, because I have a tendency to, like, be a little harder on myself than maybe is necessary. But dude, learning to be gracious, but also to work on myself and to continue to improve. I'm never a finished product.
Yeah, I like that, Shane. And it's cool, man. I mean, I didn't tell you this the other day when we talked, but, like, it's always hard to know. Excuse me. It's always hard to know. Like, one of the things I'm always curious about is, like, I'm obviously changing all the time. And so that's going to change the way I experience other people and the world around me.
Yeah.
And, like, when I talk to you, I'm like, wow, Shane's changed. Like,
yeah.
And I feel just a deeper sense of ease is how I'm experiencing you, and also a softness, like, not from a perspective of weakness, but just around, like, a kind of the edges are rounding a little more. And I dig it, man. I feel curious about what's transpired in your life, with you getting married and, starting this podcast, and just what's been alive for you to kind of lead you into this next chapter that I'm getting some taste of through our interaction here. And so, I mean, I know this is to interview me, but I wonder, like, if you're willing to share a little bit about what has been the big evolutions or changes in your life over the past few years, just to kind of get up, so I can get up to speed with you a little bit. And if that doesn't feel aligned with the interview, then I'm happy to shift gears, but that would be really cool if you're up for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have some notes written down, like always, but I'm no idea necessarily where this is gonna take us, and I kind of like that. I like that organicness in a lot of ways. But it's been, like you said, it's just been this, like, journey, this roller coaster in some ways, and there's a lot of things that have moved me in this direction. I've really always had this desire to kind of. One thing I've always said is I've wanted creative control of, my life in some ways, and what I do. And, this is an avenue or a path that's provided that for me. There's been a lot of little motivations along the way, but, it's been a journey. I moved out of leaving Invisible Children, I moved to, Minnesota, and, I had a buddy, my best friend, Sam, and our friend Matt, who worked at Invisible Children in 2009, actually. But they moved out there, and his wife, and she was pregnant. Matt's wife was pregnant, and they ended up having a baby. And anyway, long story short is, I moved out there, tried to find my way, and man, life is hard sometimes, and ups and downs of moving, meeting new people, trying to find my way there. and I ended up meeting my wife, and I think that's really what kept me in Minnesota for as long as it did.
Mm-hmm.
I had started kind of looking elsewhere and being like, man, it's cold as shit here, and like I don't have any reason to stay here, so why not look for jobs wherever I'm at, you know? Something that's always been important to me, and I think you probably, I'm sure we've talked about this, but helping others and just being part of something bigger than myself has always been important to me. You
Absolutely.
know, hence, you know, Haiti and Invisible Children and, you know, some of that's like led me to where I am today. But yeah, I met my wife and she's amazing. I know everybody says that I wouldn't be the person I am today without her, but I really wouldn't. She challenged me in so many ways, and we get to do this life together. And, you know, I'm challenged by her, she's challenged by me, and we get to kind of figure things out and heal from pasts and whatever. But yeah, in the last year, I've really struggled, to be honest. And I've had a lot of struggles, mental health struggles and whatnot. I mean, last fall was probably one of the lowest moments, and I'm coming up on that like year anniversary in some ways of some of the one of the lower moments of my life. I know a couple of years ago was probably the last time I really had talked to you, and you know, I was kind of struggling with things then, and I think it didn't get any better. It just kind of like progressed, you know, just not being satisfied with my life and where I was going and what I was doing, and you know, trying to figure things out. And again, it's always been something that I've wanted to do, is figure out who I am, what I'm doing, and improving myself. And so, yeah, hitting some of those low points and, I'm
curious about, do you mind if I just chime in there with, like, how have you navigated those low points? Because like I have my own stories, and I'm happy to like rip with you.
Sure.
About, you know, about what that's been like for me, but I'm curious, like, what has been what's been your way through, you know? Because I feel like a lot of times it's just our culture doesn't really talk about what that's like to go through those dark periods.
Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, like, how? Because you're right, we haven't talked in a few years. So like, what's that been like for you, and how have you found your way through it?
Yeah. You know, honestly, I just didn't like who I was. I didn't like who I was becoming. I didn't like the things that were coming out of my mouth, how I was responding to things, you know, how I was treating the people around me, you know, my wife and my quick to anger, myself in a lot of ways. I beat myself up a lot, and this is where the graces came in, you know, and learning that I need to be a little more gracious on myself. But it's not I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast, but like I've said it to some people. I've been working on loving myself, and I didn't love myself. I didn't love who I was. I hated myself in a lot of ways, you know, and not in a like self-injurious way or anything like that, but just those depressions and these like high anxiety. And I think the wake-up call for me, and I'll get back to, you know, what maybe some of the processes that I've gone through, but the wake-up call for me was Matt, the guy that I lived with when I first moved here, committed suicide 2 years ago. And honestly, I didn't have any relationship with him at that time. Just some things that happened in our lives, and I just was like, I don't trust you, and I can't have you in my life. And so that didn't mean that I wanted that to ever happen to anyone ever, you know? And I think his death really forced me to deal with my own demons in a lot of ways, and see, you know, that just come to grips and kind of figure some stuff out. And it, I don't know if I dealt with that right away very well. And so, you know, a year ago, I think it kind of reared its head a little bit. And then the other one has been, you know, we had Alex Collins from Invisible Children, who similar thing this year. And so it's just been like, whew, man, it's brought me closer to my friends in my life, my college friends. Hence, you know, I've had some podcasts with them. We were actually able to get together this last July for the first time in like 9 years. Our like, close college friends, and you know, that was really spurred from that as well, and his death, and kind of brought us all back together, and being intentional with those guys, and diving in and diving deep. I can't really say, you know, I've talked about it for a long time that I really think I needed to see someone. I'm not saying I still don't and see a therapist. I haven't done that yet. This move has been kind of move to Florida has been something that's rocked the boat a little bit and caused me to be like, you know, maybe once I get there, I don't want to find somebody here and then have to move and go through all this again and, you know, whatever. But there's been a lot of intentionality from me of just like reaching out to people that I, you know, care about and love, and building those relationships back up. Reading a lot of books, to be honest. You know, I've been taking ownership of my life and trying to educate myself in whatever way I can to be like, all right, how do I deal with some of this? I haven't, you know, I don't know how much it's helped, but I've made lifestyle changes with my diet over the last several years. I'm just being very intentional about limiting the sugars and carbs going into my body and in my life. And I had reached a point in my life that I was about 35, 40 pounds heavier than I am now, and kind of fixing some of those.
I wouldn't have wanted to wrestle you at that time.
I wouldn't have wanted to wrestle either.
That's a good point.
Yeah. But and then honestly, and I don't know how much it's helped, but it's something that I've just kept using and kept consuming. But CBD oil has really been something that I've contributed to, like just helping my mood and stabilizing, you know, my mood and myself, and helping me kind of regain control of myself. And I don't know. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But
totally.
Yeah, that's like the non-detailed version, I guess. And I haven't really thought about that, to be honest, of what the process was of me getting to where I am now. I know even my wife has mentioned, like, she's noticed such a big change in me as well. And I think this podcast in a lot of ways has been really therapeutic for me, of being able to reconnect with friends. And I'm a long-winded guy in general, but most people don't want to just sit down and riff for an hour and a half, you know? And so this is a great way for me to be able to just catch up with people, staying connected with people, and I don't know, make a difference in whatever way I can, and have a little more purpose and value in life. I think that's been a thing that I've been searching for a long time.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I feel like hearing your journey, just obviously I am sure there's a lot more to it than what you were able to touch on, you know, kind of broad strokes, but yeah, it's interesting to hear how you've navigated the territory of, you know, kind of the challenges of depression and finding your way to more, you know, it sounds like just more alignment with yourself, and also the triggers, you know, of losing people you love. And so it's, man, I've been kind of in the dark in a way for what's been up with you. And part of that's just been my lack of, you know, being able to reach out and tend to my community too. And so I'm inspired by what you're doing here, because it's a reminder of how important that is. Yeah. And,
I think it really is. I think though that community and that group, you know, and just with this and moving, even, you know, that was a real concern of mine of moving and I'm no stranger to moving. I'm no stranger to this, and it's hard sometimes. It's isolating. It's lonely until you can, you know, find that group of people and, you know, find those hobbies that people have in common. But, you know, just being intentional about reaching out to people, and, you know, I'm reading a book with a few different guys, and now, and, you know, from a distance, just kind of everybody throwing information into a group chat is, you know, it's nice, it's good. And, but yeah, I don't know, just that intentionality of everybody's thing, everybody's life, and everybody's problems and troubles are the most important to them, you know? And I care about them just as much as I care about myself. And I try to, you know, at least. And hey, I got a buddy who's, you know, renovating a house, and his family, he's got a kid, and they're, you know, he's got stressors there, and he's going back to school to get his doctorate degree, and, you know, whatever, all these different things. And I got a buddy, you know, I've got friends that just have different things going on in their lives and different challenges. And I want them to be there for me, and I have to be there for them too, you know? And
yeah.
So
that's awesome, man. It actually reminds me, like today I reached out to a buddy of mine that I grew up with, and there's a core group of men that I like played sports with and just have had a friendship with since I was like 5-6 years old.
Yeah.
And one of the things I admire so much about this friend, his name's Daniel, is like whenever I reach out, he is excited and like makes an effort to participate in my life. And
yeah.
Like, you know, Rivers just turned 1 last week, and we're going to go down to San Diego, which is where both my wife and I are from. You know, we live in the Bay Area now.
Yeah.
And like just knowing that he's going to come to the party and like bring, you know, he's like, what should I get him? And there's just this quality of generosity and care that like I struggle with personally. Like it's something that there's other ways that I care and show my care and generosity, but that's like the way he does it is something that I just admire, and it gives me more, more modeling of like how I can be more the way that I want to be to keep those friendships really solid. Because at the end of the day, I mean, you know, that's such a big part of life to have those friendships and to keep them. And I think that's something I'm realizing more now as I'm like starting a family and like feeling some places in my life that are just not as full as I want them to be. Sure. You know, and it's always a balancing act, but there is something about that like nourishing community that I think is so important and it's challenging in certain ways in a more modern life, you know? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. I love that. I mean, it's cool to see, you know, and I think it's the mark of, you know, I've had a lot of those conversations in recent months too of, it's just cool to see those people that you can reach out to and like you just pick up where you left off, and there's that same energy and same like,
totally,
I don't know, excitement and whatnot. Well,
yeah.
Let's take it back a little ways here, Noah.
All right.
You know, I know you're
Where are we going?
I know you're no stranger to losing people you care about, or losing someone you cared about. Prior to me meeting you, you lost your brother.
Yeah.
And I know that was really hard, to put it lightly. And you took some time to kind of process that and to deal with that on your own. Do you mind jumping into that with us?
Yeah, totally. I think like even stepping back a step further,
sure.
Just because it feels like it will help with my process around my brother. You know, I think it's interesting. Losing him started just kind of like and it wasn't actually started necessarily. Like I had started to question my life before my brother, you know, his name was Nathan, before he died. And for me, the way that showed up was just like, it was kind of like at the time, what I would call a spiritual longing. It was like,
yeah,
I was super focused on business and like making money and just like success as I defined it, which was like to be more, you know, I guess just to like, I don't even know if I had a specific clear like definition for it, but it was more definitely like making money, being admired by people, having nice things. And at some point in that process, I just like felt like I lost touch with myself.
Yeah.
in striving for those things. And so that kind of opened up, a process of really looking within and asking questions and reading books and trying different, exploring different things like meditation and therapy. And then my brother died, and actually that happened like a few months after I left a nine-year relationship with a woman that I, deeply loved. And we had in many ways a really great relationship, but something wasn't quite clicking for both of us. And so that ended. And then my bro died, and and it's been like 10 years since that happened.
Yeah.
And I think throughout that process, him dying was a real catalyst for me to go deeper in just really understanding myself. And I still haven't made sense of the last 10 years of my life. I don't know if I ever will.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck was that?
I know.
I feel like I was kind of on the fringes. I wasn't as, Invisible Children was a really cool time in the past decade, because I feel like, it gave me a chance to kind of get grounded and recentered with really good, like, hearted people, creative people.
I agree.
You had a similar experience on that?
Yeah, I feel like Invisible Children, it's just a community of, in a lot of ways, I mean, I don't know, a lot of ways grounded people, that like-minded. We all had a vision and one goal in mind, and we are working to make that a reality. And I think that everybody, especially, Invisible Children led to me discovering my faith, or rediscovering, or more so the breakdown of that in a lot of ways, of like letting go of my faith, in some ways. Of I had the ability to go deep with people and have conversations, and that was the first step to being okay with not going to church and not not being a part of that community anymore, which led to where I am today. And it keeps coming up, but I don't call myself a Christian anymore. And, to put that out into the world is, new to me. But it's came up in the last couple podcasts, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's been something I've held on to, of not wanting my family, or, more specifically my mom, who probably is listening right now. But, I don't think it's not a secret anymore. And it's something that, I've been able to let go of. And I guess it's just an exploration of, that part of my life. And when you're surrounded by people that genuinely care about you and love you and care about the world in general, I think that you're able to have deeper conversations and more intentional conversations about life. And that's where Invisible Children really opened the door for me in some ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. And I'm like still taking in your, you saying that you're not a Christian. And it's cool, because like, I just love to hear you speak your truth. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because I've had conversations with one of my good buddies, Tony. We've actually, this week, he texts me on, after the first podcast that I ever said that. And he was like, hey, congrats on, kind of coming out and, saying that publicly. I know that's probably not easy. And, we had conversation about how he kind of sees that, or like, there's just so many different versions of quote Christianity in some ways. So he's like, when people ask me if I am, I'm always like, well, what do you mean by that? And so for me, it's just, that's it. Like, I don't know. I don't need to it's just, it is, that's like, it is a big step for me, I think, in some ways, of, letting go of fear and not being fear-based, but just being, like you said, speaking my truth. And, that's just where I'm at. So.
I love it, man. Yeah, I really, I can, I have a sense that it's a big deal for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, because I've held back. I've felt like I've held back, compartmentalize these different parts of my life, and I'm starting to let go of those. And I don't know if that was some of my, mental health stuff that's kind of rearing its head and being like, dude, you talk about being authentic, but you're not. So like, either, like, do it and be what you say you are, or like stop pretending,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's cool that you say that. And I think it's interesting because, right, like with authenticity, I mean, I've always felt like you're authentic. I remember the first time I saw you, and we didn't even like fully meet, but you were just walking through the old office, downtown, like on that upper level, and you had your sleeves rolled up, and I just saw your, like, and almost more, I like felt your energy come through the room, and I was like, dude, I dig this guy, and like I think I was actually there visiting Chris Carver, just doing a tour, and I had just come back from India, and like was just kind of like curious about IC because Chris, had been pretty excited about it, and I was like, I just appreciated your vibe, and it was cool like that later on, we became friends, and I got to, oversee you in terms of our department. And so
that's funny because I don't even remember bumping into you like that. That's funny.
I don't know if you even saw me, dude. That was just, I don't know if I ever shared that with you.
No,
that
I
was
think
just
you
my
have.
first experience of like, in a way connecting with you, even though it wasn't a formal, explicit like connection. And so I feel like I've always perceived you as authentic, but I also get what you're saying, that like there's more of ourselves, I think, or I know for myself, there's more of myself that I can share if I'm willing to face the fear that comes up.
Well, and I read something recently. I came across this, I think it was a post on Instagram, but and within it, this one little piece stuck out to me, and it was basically like having integrity with myself. Mm-hmm. And that concept, I guess, is of like integrity with myself. And I feel like that's really something I was like, yeah, that hits home, that was like okay, that sticks out to me. And it stuck with me, and I've just kind of rolled around in my head for the last couple of weeks of, and integrity with myself. And I don't know that I had that. I felt that I had that in the past, and that's something that I value a lot, is integrity. And like, okay.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's interesting because it's like you're actually, as you share that, it gives me insight, because I almost feel like part of going deeper is like, for me, been like facing the ways that I'm not in integrity.
Sure.
And a lot of that's just been like, it's not to not take responsibility for it, but I feel like it's a paradox, because it's like so much of the way that I have been in the world was inherited, just from family and culture and friends. And like, by looking at the things that just don't align for my deeper truth, then I feel like I have been able to find more integrity and authenticity. And going deep into those places that don't feel aligned has felt out of alignment, because it's like I'm in it. I'm like actually facing those things.
Yeah.
And that can be really hard.
Yeah.
And so it's just an interesting frame that I don't know if I've ever looked at it that way. But as you were sharing about, your kind of how you're holding being integrity with yourself, I'm like, wow, I guess I can't say I have no idea what you've been like over the past few years, because we haven't been, spending a lot of time together. But like, I've always just sensed that on a deep level, you've had a lot of integrity. And so I'm just wondering if there's any resonance to that concept of like, like facing the places that are out of integrity can make it feel sometimes like not being in integrity.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And I mean, I would say I've been my same old self in some ways, but, I guess just, I think the different avenue, or just kind of even sharing like my faith journey, or that little bit of my like faith and kind of figuring out, it's always been something that, I grew up, my dad was a pastor, and, I was always in the church. So I think that was just something that was big for me, and it's been an ongoing process of figuring out. I mean, I was a junior in college, sophomore, junior in college, whenever I like first started questioning my faith and started to like break that down and figure out, what do I actually believe and why do I believe it, and asking myself these why questions and exploring that. And it again, it's like college, then Invisible Children, and that was the first time I gave myself permission. That's how I say it, is like I gave myself permission to not go to church anymore, and like I don't want to go. And it was a weight that it was like off my shoulders. And I think this is that third wave of this in some ways, for me, being like, I don't think it's any surprise to anybody, even though I had never really vocalized that specifically to my mom. I don't think that it was a surprise. It's just the way I had handled, situations or whatever. I'm not running away. It's not that something that I believe, and something I've said on here many times, is a truth is a truth is a truth. And there are a lot of truths. There are a lot of truths in the Bible. There are a lot of truths in the Christian faith, but there are also a lot of truths in a lot of different places. And I want to seek that and always be checking those truths to make sure they're still true. And I don't know, just never, I don't live in absolutes. That's just something I want to keep an open mind. I want to always be checking in on those things. And I don't know. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. I appreciate like you're sharing about your faith and in a way becoming more like an integrity around it.
Yeah.
Inspires me to share, like tying it back to, you asking about my brother. Like,
yeah.
There's a piece with my life that I have kind of swept under the rug, and it's only been, and not completely, but also in some ways I have, and that's around like, the family I grew up in.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm still finding kind of coherence around the story, but I think at the essence, like, I love my parents, my mom and dad. They're both still alive. They're divorced.
Yeah.
But I have kind of like protected my family and its story, probably for my own safety on some level. I'm not completely clear on why. It almost feels like it's like some deep biological imperative, like you want to keep your family safe. But like, I think now having a baby, it's brought up for me, like where I came from and how I've become who I am, and a lot of the ways that I defended myself through life, or postured, or like, not been open to the world and people around me. And I think, that, at this point in my life, like I've chosen to actually not be in communication with either of my parents.
Yeah.
And it's been a really painful process to get to this point.
Yeah.
And I feel like culturally it's like, it's not something that makes sense to a lot of people. They're like, dude, like, just like get over it, like not, that's not exactly the way people say it, but it's kind of like, dude, your parents, like they made mistakes, and like, just forgive. And I believe in that. I believe in forgiveness, and even more so for myself or whoever is the one forgiving, more than like the people that are being forgiven.
Yeah.
But it's also, I think there's a truth in like that there can be families that are just not healthy families, and like, I think my coming to terms with that has been really painful, and it's taken me a long time.
Yeah.
And has alienated me from just life, in terms of like, in a way, like showing more of myself to the world. And so I think that's a place that in some ways I feel embarrassed that I'm like 37 and I'm like, working out my mommy and daddy issues.
But why? What is there ever a bad time to like figure? To work through it? I mean, if it's taking you to this point, who cares? Like what's it matter to anybody else? It's your story. It's your truth. It's part of who you are. And so, I think that healing comes in different ways and at different times. You can't force healing. It's gotta almost happen organically in some ways. You can address it. You can be intentional about it, but it takes time. Yeah. And you can't force yourself to get over something. You have to come to terms with whatever that looks like for you. So 37 or 16, who cares? It's like good for you for at least seeing that and knowing that it's something that's going on in your life.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate you saying that. I'm taking that in because, it is. There is really no right timetable to it. And I think I can be really hard on myself in terms of what I expect of myself.
Same.
Yeah, I know we share in that, dude.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, I mean, I think, part of the reason I share is just because to liberate myself from the shame of feeling like I came from a family that I was ashamed of.
Yeah.
And part of it is like sharing that it's okay to, I believe it's okay for me to choose not to have a relationship with my parents. When it feels in integrity with what's true for me and what I value and the life that I want to create.
Yeah. And
I have a hope, I have a deep wish that I will be able to love my parents and have some form of relationship with them.
Yeah.
But not when it's at the expense of my personal health or like the well-being and flourishing of my family.
Yeah.
And like my wife and my son. And so that's been a really challenging process for me over the past few years.
Yeah. Healthy boundaries. I think those are important.
Exactly. Totally. And for me, I didn't really, I've had to learn that, like the boundaries I learned were like, in a way, like bad, stay away from scary people and,
yeah.
And like, don't have boundaries other than that. That was kind of like the implicit modeling that I inherited. And so much of that was like, love people and like, get other people to like you. And I think that's been such a big part of my self-image and how I've learned to operate in the world is like just almost stepping outside myself to like make sure other people feel good and that they're like, but ultimately it was coming from a place of like self-preservation,
Yeah.
And,
and that's what I like. That's what I like about hearing you, I guess, kind of say that in some ways is that by putting it out into the world, you can no longer really hide behind it. It exists now, and I think that's maybe in some ways for me, it's saying that I'm not a Christian. I went to a conservative Christian school. I went to all these different things and I care about my status and what people think about me, but why, and if that's the truth that I believe, then what's it matter what other people think? And let's have a conversation about it. I'm open to conversations, right? Or I'm open to talk about my life and why or what and who but I don't need to hide behind that anymore. I don't need to run away from it. I think I just have to own it and be like, here it is. And that's what I hear you doing, is owning it, being like, I've been ashamed of maybe not talking to your family or your parents. And not that that's not something you still have to deal with, but it's almost like showing your hand, like, like here it is.
Well, no, I think that's a great reflection, Shane. And I'm really like valuing your perspective on it because, my wife's been really supportive. I have so much trust and like appreciation for her because she's like really fucking got my back.
Yeah.
And like, and that's, such a gift to have another person to like, that I can truly trust like through and through. And I think she's helped me to like, get more space around my past and see the ways that I've been holding on. And now that I feel like, I do think I'm turning a corner, and being on your, having this conversation with you, it feels like there's something about just like showing my hand around, like, like my past and my childhood had some really challenging, scary, painful things that happened. And part of that was, culminated in my brother dying, and that has left kind of a certain like echo in my being.
Yeah.
But the more I like am willing to like air it out and face it and share it, the more I feel like it liberates itself, and I can actually step more into the life that's right here, which is beautiful, man. I got a, amazing wife and son and job, and like, there's so much goodness present right in my life. But when I'm like caught in the pain of the past, it's often hard to really let it in,
Yeah, absolutely. And to give another like analogy, or I don't know, whatever, is this move for us, I'm currently sitting in our spare bedroom. I have a little table set up in the corner with my podcasting equipment all here. Behind me is a shit show. I mean, there's boxes, there's like, it's just crazy, right? I can still function. I'm still doing my thing. I'm still doing it. Nobody else knows, you don't see the baggage that's going on behind. In order for me to...
Well, now everybody knows, Shane.
Yeah, right? Surprise!
You outed yourself.
But in order for me to clean up this room, I have to take it out. I have to take it out into an open space. And I have to start to reorganize and start to like sort through it. I've got boxes of just stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, there's pens, there's magnets, there's whatever in this box. And I got to take all those things out because they don't all go in the same place, And so I got to sort through that. And you got to get a little messy before you can get clean, and so like sometimes you gotta spread it out, and you gotta like move things around, and you gotta empty that room out and evaluate what you got going on before you can start putting it back into its order.
Yeah. That's a great example. That's helpful. Yeah. So it's exactly it, right? It's like creating the space.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's an interesting thing, because like part of me now, being a dad, and like I look back on many years of feeling like I was sorting through things.
Sure.
And there's a part of me that's like, why did I take so long? Why did I take so much space to do that? Because I could have been like building my career or making money or having cool experiences. But it also is like, it takes as much time as it takes. And I still don't understand why it takes what it takes, but like, I don't know if I ever will, maybe part of making peace with it is just accepting that there's like kind of like you said, it happens the way that it happens. And
that's why we're having this conversation, I mean, like your life could have looked so much different had things been different, but we're having a conversation today because of the experiences and because of the things that you've gone through, and this conversation in and of itself. And, this is what I love about the podcast, and, why I've said it on here before, and I'll keep saying it, but do good and make a difference. I've been pressured in some ways to narrowly focus that in. What do you mean do good? What do you mean make a difference? And I'm not going to narrow that in, besides the fact of like, I don't know what that looks like, and that's okay. But if this conversation that we're having right now allows someone else to have a conversation with their family, or to look a little deeper into their own life, or whatever that is, then isn't that awesome? Isn't that doing good? Isn't that making a difference? And
that is.
And
yes.
I just think that everybody has a story, and I think that the more we understand that we're more alike than we are different, but that it's okay to be different, and that it's okay to be who we are, and to love each other anyway. I think that's huge. So, my
ears are being massaged by your words, bro. I dig it. And it actually makes me think of like, I'm not a huge Star Wars guy, but like, what you're talking about to me feels like the Force.
Yeah.
And it's like, the force is with us, and it's like even the dark side is part of the dance, and I think it doesn't mean that like I believe I'm responsible for my dark impulses.
Yeah.
But they're not inherently bad. Like if I hold them that way, then I'm going to probably continue to perpetuate them. But like, if I'm able to actually accept that, like at the core of that darkness is the desire for love and for the force, then I can make peace with it, And so I don't know why I'm sharing that, but it's just like something about what you said made me think of the force and how like, we're all an expression of that. And it moves in its own way. And, and to try and like, for me to try and line up with that as much as I can and just trust it is what makes me feel the most alive and makes me feel like I'm living a meaningful life,
Yeah. It's the yin and the yang. The book, one of the books I'm reading is the Jordan Peterson book, 12 Rules to Life. And it's the order and chaos. He talks about order and chaos and how it's like the yin and the yang to life. And it sounds similar to kind of what you were saying, the dark side, and it exists. It's always going to be there. There's always going to be chaos. And when you step out into that chaos, you still find order within the chaos. And, you got to get dirty sometimes. I don't know, in order to. Yeah.
No, it's true, man. I mean, it makes me think back on what we've been talking about too, with like, like depression. Like, I think for the first 25 years, 20, maybe even 30 years of my life, like I didn't really feel much depression.
Yeah.
And maybe I was just covering it up with, especially from college on, like I feel like I drank a lot of alcohol and just like was on the go and, and I didn't really think about, I just didn't ask some of the questions that, I think we're like kind of riffing on now. But then hitting those darker times, I feel like there's something really, it shaped me into who I am now. And, and there's something about that struggle through that, like the chaos, and the way that it shapes us.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, I guess, I also I have a different upbringing. Like I kind of missed the Christian roots that I came from.
Yeah.
My parents both came from very Christian families. My dad especially had a father who was like built a church in San Diego and was a missionary in India for many years. And so like that tradition and lineage has been a part of my life. I just have had, I'm still finding my own truth around it.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just that sense of like bad and evil that like comes through in some ways, like a lot of modern Christianity.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's an interesting conversation to have because I think it's important to like explore what is the darkness and what is the evil and how can it be worked with in a way that will be of the highest good of all, within ourselves and like as a humanity.
Right.
But I also find that like when I look at how I've worked with evil and continuing to learn how to inside myself, it's like by pushing against it almost makes it stronger in a way versus like giving it space, kind of back to that analogy you gave about like taking the stuff out of the office.
Yeah.
And then it's like being curious about it and like wanting to understand like what is this impulse? What is it truly wanting,
Yeah.
And I don't know, it feels better for me to hold the dark or the evil that way because it just feels more whole somehow.
Right. Well, I think it's this facade that we think we're in control of things. But are we really? We're allowing something else to control us, but we're in control of the information in a way, in a sense. I keep saying the same things over and over on this podcast, but I wrote for the first time, I wrote on a sticky note and stuck it on my mirror in my bathroom here, a little piece, and it was don't give away your power. And for me, what that looks like is, man, I can get annoyed and frustrated at things, and I'm like want to like the best example, the one I keep giving on the podcast is, when I'm driving and somebody cuts you off, or somebody's going too slow, or doesn't use a turn signal, or does one of the million things that people do that are dumb and stupid. Instead of honking my horn and flipping them off and being all pissed and whatever, and like it affecting who I am and my attitude and my mood, I'm not going to give my power away. I'm going to hold on to that and be like, no, you don't deserve that. That's mine, and that's
I
been,
like that, man.
It's been a reminder to me. It's sitting there on my mirror. Just don't give away your power, so.
Yeah. What's that been like for you to actually like put that practice into place? It's
made me really ask the questions like, why am I getting frustrated at that? Here's another example. We had at our apartment, we moved from a house to an apartment, and there's like different challenges with that. But now going back to like, I did property management. You're in real estate. I know we didn't mention that, but I did property management and real estate. And so there's just a way about going about things, a way of doing things that for me, I'm like particular about. I'm particular about a lot of things, but one is they sent us this notice, and the notice was, hey, move everything off of your balcony and out of the like hallway. It's outdoor hallway. We're going to spray everything down, and, we're going to pressure wash your apartment, your building on this specific day, which was a week and a half ago or a week ago. And, in my experience, in my property management experience, if you're not going to do it on that specific day, you got to put a date range, Oh, I think we lost him. We lost Noah. Hold on. We'll get him back. There we go. Calling. Hey, we lost you.
Yes.
Welcome back. But yeah, so they didn't.
Thank you. Yeah.
They didn't put this date range on there, so it was just this one specific day. Well, that day came and went. Well, how am I supposed to put my stuff back out there? Like, whatever. Well, a week goes by, and yesterday they came through, and here I hear them pressure washing and doing things. And it just it got to me, right? Like, it just made me really frustrated. And texting my wife, I'm like, I'm really frustrated about this, and I don't know why. Like, why is this frustrating to me? They're doing a service to the building. It doesn't really affect me. We had this hurricane scare because, this massive hurricane that came through and missed us, thank goodness. But so everything was in anyway. It didn't inconvenience me at all. Why is this a big deal to me? And, in a lot of ways, it was like, that's the question of like, well, yes, there should be order. This should happen. There should be a different way. But why am I letting it affect me? Or why is it bothering me so much? And just checking in with myself. And so, I'm constantly working on myself and doing those different things and kind of checking on that of why is this frustrating me? I also had a gal, Geneva, if you're listening, she told me about, I'm an emotional guy and I get frustrated at things, or even just emotionally, whether I'm watching a video and makes me cry or, whatever. But she mentioned this book that she had read, and talking about a certain part of the brain that controls all these different, your emotions. And she was kind of talking about her father. She's Russian, and she's like, it's true. The stereotypes are true. Like we don't show a lot of emotion. My dad never showed emotion growing up. And it's like one thing that she, kind of challenged me with, and I've been working on, is like, whenever you find yourself emotional or you're upset or you're frustrated, tell yourself like, I'm not going to assign emotion to that. It doesn't deserve emotion. Like if somebody cuts you off, like I'm not going to assign emotion to that. It's the same concept of like, I'm not going to give away my power, but,
totally.
But just recognize, I think it's, it's in some ways the same conversation we're having of you're talking about like, I recognize I'm not having this, I don't have this relationship with my family, and recognizing that is half the battle. And then it's what to do with it, and it's the same thing with your emotions. It's like, okay, I can let it control me. I can give it fuel, or I can say like, nope, this is just the way it is, and I'm just gonna do. So.
Yeah, no, it's cool, man. I'd say that's a fascinating inquiry, because I think there's a lot in there, you know, especially as men, and I mean, I'm sure there also is for women, you know, and it's not necessarily about gender, but there is an element of, you know, men being
prideful
able to
egos.
express their emotions.
Yeah.
You know, and then I also, with you, dude, my wife, you know, when she listens to this, she's going to be like, yeah, what that Russian woman said. What's her name again?
Geneva.
Geneva. Yeah, my wife is going to love what you had to say, because like, I think I can be more emotional, actually. And I think that's I think it's a superpower on some level, because it's like, you know, emotions have a lot of information in them. And if I'm relating to my emotions with care and curiosity, then I think they can be super valuable.
Yes.
And especially more so than the more traditional kind of like men hold their, you know, live in our heads and like keep our bodies all rigid and strong and like, you know, not show any emotion.
Yeah.
And then live a very one-dimensional kind of mental life. But I also think like full circle, like I'm learning now how to do exactly what you're saying, and or what Geneva's saying of like, do I really need to give my emotions the driver's seat here?
Right.
You know, can I give them space to actually acknowledge them and you know, and give them like the respect they deserve, but not be like letting them run the show.
Yeah. It's like meditation. I know that I know that that's or was at least, I'm assuming it's probably still a part of your life. But it's like, you know, when you have those random thoughts, it's like you can run with them, or you can just recognize, hey, there was that random thought, and then you let it go.
Yeah, totally.
It's the same thing. It's just a real life practice of that in some ways, but.
Totally. And I mean, it makes me think of like, one thing I do think is important is like, you know, I think there's a lot of us that, you know, even if we, that weren't able to feel our feelings because it just, you know, culture has certain rules on some level around what's acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah. And
I think especially as men, like, I mean, there's a few things, like one is it's common for a lot of men not to cry, right? Just because it's like, suck it up, be strong, you know, and I think that there's some beauty in that, right? That a man can stand tall amidst like really challenging situations and not break down.
Sure.
But I also think like that can create distance if it becomes a pattern.
Yeah.
That like the sadness doesn't have a place to move, or the grief doesn't have a place to move.
Right.
And then I also think the same thing with anger, like the last few years, like, and this has been part of the journey around like my family, is like learning, like, you know what, like, it's funny too, because my brother Nate, he was super perceptive, and he always used to say, dude, you're so angry. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm the furthest thing from angry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
I would never classify you as angry either, but
yeah. Well, it's interesting, man. Like a volcano of anger has just like been lurking inside me for, I think, I'm guessing all my life, but I've finally, you know, over the past few years felt safe enough inside myself to really like open to it. And it's scary, you know, in a way, because like our culture doesn't really condone anger for men, unless it comes out like through sports or certain environments.
Right.
And so I think it's like how, you know, it has been and continues to be an interesting question, is like, how do we express these things that are very natural, that culture has certain rules around, but the rules aren't necessarily in support of like the emotional well-being of us as people on some level, you know?
Sure. Yeah, I agree.
So anyway, that's kind of a rant, but I mean, I guess it comes down to like men being able to feel their feelings, but
well, and I've always been,
how do we do that?
I've always been this like really emotional guy too. I mean, you know, it's always been the joke, even at Invisible Children, like on my team, you know, my teams, and Andrea and Alex would always, you know, like I was the crier. I cried at the drop of a hat. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm angry. I cry when I'm passionate. And man, I got a lot of passion. And
you do, man. And I love your tears, you know.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with those, you know. It's just knowing, I think when you can, I mean, I just think when you can harness your emotions and use them appropriately at certain times, and it can be a burden to some people if you just start unloading and they're not ready for that. And you know, but knowing when the time is and when the time isn't. I also have had, that was one of the manifestations of my anxiety and depression and some of my like mental health issues, was this anger within me and not feeling like I was in control of it. Like it just exploded. This volcano came out. And so that's why I guess some of these different little practices that I've been working on in my own life has been so huge for me and beneficial, of actually feeling like I'm dealing with them and working through them and not just suppressing it and shoving it down and being like, nope, you can't come out.
Totally.
But
no, that's awesome.
How has your, like, you know, fatherhood, you know, marriage, obviously, I think, I'm assuming that that's really brought to light some of the things maybe that you've been dealing with. I know the process of you and your wife of, you know, being married and that process for you was a journey in and of itself, and now fatherhood and kind of looking at some of those different aspects of your life. How has that been, you know, affected some of the different emotions and different things you've been processing?
I mean, it's been the trampoline for sure.
Yeah.
Like my wife, meeting her, just like catapulted me into a whole another dimension.
Yeah.
And not necessarily like in an all good way, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think the most challenging period in my life has been since I've been married to my wife. But also the most rich.
Yeah.
And her and I, like the love that was, wow, like I still remember we actually went to high school together.
Okay.
And I was a couple years older than her. And so we weren't, you know, really close back then, but she apparently had a crush on me. And at that time I was kind of checked out. I was a senior and like, you know, had a short schedule, and most of my best friends had graduated a year earlier. So I was kind of thought I was hot shit and like, I'm going to, you know, I'm done with this. And like, long story short, we kept in loose contact over the years, and then we reconnected. Gosh, it was 2013-ish.
Yeah.
It's actually, I think I was at IC still, so I probably, you may have some recollection of when I started dating her.
Yeah, I remember it more afterwards, whenever I moved to Minnesota and I was working, and I know we had a few conversations about it, but I don't know if I remember hearing about it at IC, but who knows? It was a whirlwind.
Okay. Yeah. It was a total whirlwind. There was so much going on at that time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in a way, I think like having a practice partner, and having the love, such a strong love that has kept me and her. I think I obviously don't want to speak for her, but my sense is that she has a similar feel around just being willing to like ride the highs together, and celebrate those times, and then also to like go through the things that are really hard, and a lot of that for me has been like healing the past, you know. And so it's kind of, I feel like to some degree it's kind of easy to get through life without like letting down defenses if you're kind of, you know, just with friends. And I mean, people I think get it. Like I'm sure all my friends have been like seen my defenses, and you kind of get used to them or whatever.
Sure.
But like with a partner, it's just like, at least the type of relationship I want to have, it's just like that. And especially the one type that she wants to have, it's like, that doesn't fly, you know. It's like, no, we got to work through that. And so, you know, I hate her and I love her. It depends on the day.
Yeah. I understand. More love than hate, but there's some days you're like, what are you doing? What's happening? Come on.
Totally. No, and I'm with you. Like, I mean, I think that's the beauty, right, of like of going to the difficult places, is that, you know, the more willingness, at least for me, that there's been, and for her, I think the more that love can become the baseline. You know, it's almost like there's a death to the old self in a way, like almost like a giving, a shedding of who we were and who we've kind of postured ourselves to be, and then like allowing something new to be born, both as a couple and like a marriage, as a union, but also as like individuals, you know. And so, I just feel my heart as I share about her, because she's such an amazing woman, and I don't think I aspire to be able to love her the way that she deserves to be loved. You know, that's one of my like North Stars in my life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It really is. I mean, to always be striving for that, and I think that grounds you in some ways, or at least does for me. It's like the foundation of a meaningful relationship in general. I mean, you could say the same with whatever relationship in some ways, you know?
True. Yeah.
Of kind of like looking at that, like how can I serve that person in a sense, you know, of like give them what they deserve.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm also curious, though, there does feel like there's a distinction, and I don't know quite what it is. And maybe that's my own, you know, maybe it's my own, like, limitation that I just haven't collapsed yet. But it's like, with my wife, it feels like there's more motivation than, like, even friendships, you know? Like, maybe that's part of it is having a child, because it's almost like we've got this ecosystem that we're growing, and like if we're not fully committed to each other, that it creates a certain drag or like lack of I don't know, efficiency is not the right word, but of like thriving, and then it affects us all. And so you know, I think I'm curious about that, because obviously you're married now. Like, how do you hold your marriage versus like your friendships? Are there different levels of commitment that you bring to those different relationships?
Yeah, there is. I think you're right, but I wonder if it isn't, you know, if there isn't a different that I just don't understand with having a child. We have our little fur baby, Chansey Poo, who's in the studio with us here. But yeah, I just feel there is it is different for sure from friends to my wife. And I think maybe for me it's even different in the sense that I grew up an only child. You know, I have a stepbrother and sister, but they came along a little bit later, and I think our relationship as I get older and they get older, that is growing more now. But you know, I didn't live with a sibling. I didn't have that, and so it's been an exploration, I think, in how to love someone and what that means for us. We're such our own people, but at the same time, I'm continually amazed at how well we give back and forth to one another. It's never, we've had these conversations, you know, there's been different people or different situations in our life where we're like, I don't understand why they care so much about that person going and doing that thing, you know, or working, you know, coaching or whatever it is. It's like, yeah, you know, and again, we don't have kids, so there's this one piece, and most of our friends, and a lot of our friends have kids at this point in time. We're at that stage of life where most of them are having their second or third child, and the other ones are beginning to go through their divorces. So I'm sure you can relate to some of those. It's like there's the stage of life where it's like everybody's getting married, everybody's having kids, then it's like everybody's having their second and third kid, and then there's the divorces. And it's just an interesting stage of life as we get older. But yeah, I don't know if I answered that question. I think that one's tough. I haven't really thought of it in that way, I guess.
Yeah,
I think the kid having children, I think is a piece to our life that will affect us differently and force us to love each other and look at each other and deal with our love for one another in a different light in some ways, or bring out a few different things.
Yeah, that's cool that you're holding it that way now, and because it's it's tough to know, right? Like, you could probably get perspective from friends that are there or that have kind of treaded that territory already. But I also think it's unique. I'm sure there's themes that you can tune into.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's one thing maybe it's cool to share about is like, sometimes I feel like there's not enough truth around being a parent, what it means. And maybe it's my own journey.
Yeah. Well, what does it mean to be a parent to you?
It means fucking early morning and late night.
I hear that. That seems to be a theme in the parents that I know as well.
Oh, that's a great question though, Shane. I mean, it's like, I'm learning what it means. I don't know if I've gotten totally clear on that. I think it's, this may sound like, I kind of judge this way of looking at it, but it almost is like the most high stakes project that I've ever taken on.
Sure.
Because, playing sports can be a project, like doing like the science fair in school growing up, like taking on a business venture, like they're all in a way. I mean, especially if I hold life lightly, as if it's almost like this celebratory game that we get to participate in. Yeah. And we get to take on these different projects at different phases. And being a father feels just like the most high stakes, most rewarding, but also most delicate and like high responsibility project that I've ever embarked upon. Yeah. So it's really hard. I find it to be like, it just energetically, it's tiring. I think if parents can be in good shape, both emotionally and physically, before they have kids, like it's that much, it puts you in that much better of a position, to just deal with the reality of like the lifestyle. Sure. My wife and I don't have family like immediately nearby. So, I think are carrying a lot of the responsibility ourselves as a choice. But it's amazing. Like the invitation to love that is my son. Yeah. Is just, it's hard to even describe it. There's such a joy and a beauty and a immediacy to it that, there's really nothing else like it.
Yeah. That's what everybody says. I feel like I understand, but I don't have kids, so I don't know how to understand. You know what I mean? Like I hear you. I hear that sentiment a lot. I mean, I honestly can't imagine feeling the love that my friends and people that have children have expressed to me that they have for their kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard to, right? I think that sounds really honest, because it's like, I know I didn't know. Yeah. And I still feel like it's fresh and new. Like I'm learning how to tune into it. Yeah. It's like, River's so real. Like there's not all the like, he's just himself. Sure. And so if I can like slow down to really like just like be in that place with him, then it's almost like then he's pointing me back to like the love that's always here, and we just get to share in it together. And the more I can like put my cell phone down or like carve out time where, I think my business is so important or all these obligations that I have, and I can actually just like really make space for being with him, then I get to tune into that gift of like being in love, Yeah. Does being a father, does it bring out
different emotions, a different, not emotions, a different, how do you view your wife now that you have a child?
It's a great question. I miss her.
Ah.
Yeah, she's mom, and she's like,
yeah,
like her and River are like two peas in a pod, and
yeah,
and then she's, because she's with him so much, she needs her own space, just for her to kind of charge her battery,
right?
And so I just last night we actually had this call. She's in San Diego right now. I'll be heading down tomorrow, and she's with her family, and we were just on the phone, and it reminded me of when we first started dating. We would talk on the phone because I was in San Diego at that time and she was up here.
Yeah.
And we were just it's almost like we were started courting each other again, just in the sense that we're different people, and we've gone through this experience where I've taken on new responsibilities as a father, and spending, caring for River and her, and then she's taken on a ton of new responsibilities. I mean, she's fucking amazing, man, what women do. And I don't know, I could go off on a rant on the, I just feel like our culture, there's a myth there for me about how important a mom is to the evolution of human beings, because that first year of life, a mom is essentially she is the source of life for this baby that is going to become an adult someday. And it's just, and then there's this there's maternity, you get maternity leave, you get 3 months if you're lucky. And then women are just kind of expected to just do it. And it's just it feels like there's something missing. And I don't know exactly what it is, but women are just, my wife is amazing to see what she naturally just does to care for a child. And I'm still learning to understand it and appreciate it, but I think I miss her, and I'm excited to rekindle our relationship in a new way, which I think we're starting to lean into now that we've been, kind of a year into parenting.
Yeah. I think that's a really honest answer, Noah. And I think that saying you miss your wife, I think is I appreciate that answer. I've had conversations with my friends that have kids, and I think that's what they've been saying, but I don't think that's the words that have came out. And I don't know if that's it's just that it's a refocusing of attention to like you said, it's this very real being that's in your life, and the biggest project you've ever had, that now all of your attention's here, and it's away from maybe the relationship with your wife. And I honestly think that that's probably one of the biggest things that's held Dana and I back from having kids to this point. We've only been married just over a year now, but we've been together for a while, and it's not like we haven't talked about kids. And she's 30, I'm 31, so we're still on the younger side, but there's
totally,
that's a conversation that we have to we are having, and we've had. And though it's not in the near future, I don't believe for us, it's something that we both want and desire, but of the lifestyle change that is required for to have kids, I think that's in some ways, and I think it spills into the relationship between her and I, and that connection that we have, and wanting to continue to have this connection that we do have, not just the ability to go and do whatever we want, or, whatever that looks like, but also the fact that we want to have that relationship with one another.
Totally, bro. I dig it. I get excited when you talk about that. I'm like, dude, do not do it until you feel it,
Yeah.
And I feel like Or go ahead.
No, I don't. We're okay. We're happy with where we're at right now. We're good.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's beautiful. Yeah, you enjoy the space and the opportunity. You know, it will only strengthen your. I mean, in my view, it will only strengthen your commitment to each other and to your child when you actually do have you know, if and when you make that decision.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I mean, I think there is some truth in, like, you probably heard this before. I did a ton where people are like, you're never ready. Yeah. And I think there is truth in that. At like some point, you just like, kind of like, you know, when you go jump off the diving board for the first time, like you like there's no way to get around the fact that like it's a quantum leap.
Right. But you still have to walk up the stairs to get onto the board and to jump off.
Yeah. Yeah, and in this case, you know, it's a little more fun, the activity that you get to, you know, participate in order to make the baby, but it's likened to a diving board, you know?
Yeah, versus getting, like, pushed in the pool.
Exactly. So, yeah, man, I mean, I love being a dad, and I think I didn't know. I think I always in my heart had a sense that I wanted it, and then I went through a phase where I didn't feel like I was ready, and I think... Or I felt, I mean, even a more true answer is I was scared. Sure. I was scared to acknowledge what would be required of me. And I didn't know, I think deep down I had insecurities of whether I could do it in the way that I wanted to do it. And I think I still do, you know, but the cool thing is instead of looking at that as like something that holds me back, now I go like, wow, like I'm sure most dads that have walked the earth have had fears of whether they could rise to become who they want to, both for themselves and for their wife and son, or you know, whatever their configuration is. And I'm starting to tune into that more, which is like, dude, that's where the juice is. Yeah. That's like, that power is like, that force is nuclear of like, wow, I can do this for my wife and my son. And then, and then it's like things that I just couldn't shift patterns or habits or like, you know, carve out new pathways in myself before River. Now I'm like, dude, like I'm going to find a way.
Yeah. That's cool. That's really cool. It's a higher sense of like purpose and drive.
Yeah, totally. And part of that too is cleaning shit up, you know, like, like, you know, bringing back the analogy of cleaning out the room and like, there's a lot of, you know, I think I've worked on myself a lot. But there's a new level that has revealed itself in being a dad, because on some level it's like, if I don't change these ways that I am, like I'm literally like downloading it to my child. Yeah, sure. And it's just, you know, not, and I'm good. That's another piece that I think is cool to like, you know, my wife and I have worked on together, is there's an inevitability that there's like, we're going to make mistakes and we're flawed and like there's no way around that, and kind of coming to terms with that truth, and also being like, and there's the responsibility to show up with as much love and clarity and consciousness as possible. Absolutely. Noah, we have actually, a wild ride, man. We've actually reached the end. We've got less than 2 minutes before I need to cut things off. Would you like to share anything before we go? Well, I think I'm grateful. Likewise. For this opportunity, man. The timing of it feels really just like it couldn't have been better. Good, and so thank you for, you know, creating this chance to connect. And that feels, you know, and I love you, man. I'm grateful for you and what you're doing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for your vulnerability and opening up with us, and, you know, challenging me on a few things as well. I really do appreciate that. I'm very, very grateful for this opportunity as well. So thank you. I feel that, brother. Well, let's keep the dialogue going offline, and man, I look forward to whatever's next. Same. Noah Manning, thank you so much. I appreciate it. For all of you out there,
Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Something spoke to you. Let us know. Shoot us a message right on our Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, whatever that might be. We appreciate you all out there. Don't forget, do good. Make a difference. We love ya. Peace.